So I want to talk now about integrity. Because integrity is the core idea amongst those philosophers who've tried to make Nietzsche into a bit more of a moral philosopher, or someone who we can bring into moral philosophy discussion, even if he isn't actually a moral philosopher in any obvious sense. So what does integrity mean? Well, in a rough sense, it means all the bits fitting together. It means coherence. It means whole. So it means something hanging together as a whole, where the bits all relate to each other in a way that's kind of more than mechanical. But in ethics, it means something like being true to yourself. It means something like keeping the promises to yourself. So here, we are very much back in the territory of the sovereign individual, right? The person with the prerogative to promise. And the sovereign individual has the prerogative to promise, you will remember, because their promises are essentially promises to themselves. So one of the standard questions in moral philosophy about utilitarianism is the deathbed promise. So, you are the eldest child of a dying farmer, and the farmer clutches your hand and says, "You won't sell the family farm, will you? It's been in the family for 5 generations, and it'd be terrible if it passed out the family." So you say, "Oh, don't worry, Dad, don't worry. No way we're going to sell the family farm." And all right. So, and then, the farmer passes away, satisfied that the farm won't be sold because they've been promised, right? But you find yourself saddled, you and your siblings find yourselves saddled with debt. The farm's making no money. It's not just about what's good for you, it's what's good for your brothers and sisters and your children and their children. None of you has any interest in farming, right? You all went away and learned other trades. You're making more money and you're happier doing some other line of business. So nobody in the family wants the farm. The farm's losing money. And there's, somebody wants to makes you a good offer for it. So in utilitarian terms, the maximization of everybody's happiness would be best served by selling the farm. But you promised. And of course the tension arises from the fact that the person you promised is no longer there, they having died. Well, the sovereign individual, I think, has an answer to this, which is that when the sovereign individual promises, the sovereign individual's promises are also promises to themselves, right? So the sovereign individual will keep a promise just because they have promised. So part of integrity is sticking to your commitments through thick and thin. But there's a bit more to it than this. And to get to that, we need another story involving death. It's amazing how much death there is in ethics. So one version of this is, an earthquake, and you can save several of the town's elders, important people, or you can save one member of your family who is an irrelevant and undistinguished person. Perhaps they're even a bit of a nuisance, but they're nevertheless your family. Whichever you do should be consistent with who you are, right? Integrity would mean either if you save the family elders, if you save the town elders, that should be the kind of thing that you would do anyway, right? It can't be that you've been very family minded up to that point, but because there's an earthquake and for some, some bizarre circumstance makes it you the person who has this choice, And in that moment you flip and you become the kind of person who saves the important people, even if they're not members of your family, then that's not integrity. Similarly, if you've gone around making speeches about how the community is more important than any individual family, and then suddenly on the day, when push comes to shove, you save your worthless, wastrel, useless waste of skin of a cousin, rather than people who are useful to the community. Let's make them the mayor and a doctor and a midwife or something. Well, that's a lack of integrity. And here I want to mention something that the philosopher Bernard Williams talked about, which is having one thought too many. So integrity, Bernard Williams says, is the unself-conscious expression of a disposition. So what it means to act with integrity is that you don't think things through, right? So I think the example Williams talks about is if there are two people drowning and one of them is somebody important, a famous scientist who may be on the brink of inventing something that's going to make everybody's lives better, and some close family member. Maybe, and you can save one of them, right? Maybe you stand there on the bank deciding what to do, and you go, that's a very important person drowning there. I would maximise value to the community by saving that distinguished scientist who we know was working on something terribly important. Then again, this is a close member of my family. I really would prefer that person not to drown. And in fact, my relationship with this person is part of who I am. It's not just that I happen to value this person's life. My relationship with this person isn't just an incidental feature, it's part of the essence of me. And therefore, having considered both of these things, I'm going to save my close family member. Right? If you think it through, there's something wrong with you. If you think it through, then it's not as deep a commitment as it ought to be. Right? This is what Williams means by having one thought too many. If you have to think about this stuff, then there's something wrong with you. Right? If it's really the case that your relationship with that close family member is part of who you are, then you won't think about any of this stuff. You won't even start thinking about this stuff. You will just, dive in and save that person's life. So it's the unself-conscious. That's the unself-conscious means, you don't think it through. You just go ahead and do it. The unself-conscious expression in action of a disposition, right? So it's a stable tendency. It's not that on this day you happen to feel this way, but yesterday or tomorrow it might have been different. A disposition is a tendency to act in a certain way that's stable over time, right? So integrity, says Bernard Williams, is the unself-conscious expression of a disposition, that you don't have one thought too many, you just act in the way that you're supposed to. So this is a little bit like some of the discussions of courage and virtue, or courage and other virtues, right? So who is the brave person? Who is the courageous person? Is the courageous person the person who doesn't feel any fear, or doesn't feel excessive fear? Or is the courageous person the person who is afraid but exercises self-control and does whatever they have to do anyway? Is the generous person the person who just sees somebody who could use a present or is in need of some help or funds or something, or who just decides that let's have a party and invites people and doesn't has a free bar or whatever, right? And doesn't have to kind of force themselves to it, where it's just a kind of spontaneous expression of generosity? Or is it more admirable if somebody actually doesn't feel terribly generous, but nevertheless understands that actually generosity is a good thing, and therefore makes themselves act in a generous way and drives themselves in the direction of generosity? So there's a view that it's more virtuous if you are, just spontaneously acting in a virtuous fashion without having to really think about it too much. If it's just that's just the way you are, right? If it's second nature, possibly, that you've trained yourself to act in a virtuous way so thoroughly that actually you no longer need to think about it, you just do. Or are we going to value inner strife, successful inner strife? So somebody who doesn't feel like acting in the virtuous way, but drives themselves to it, makes themselves to it. Maybe we should be more impressed with the person who acts in a virtuous way in spite of their inclinations. Well, it sounds like Bernard Williams is more in the former camp. Nietzsche has enough ancient Greek pagan philosophy about him that he would prefer virtuous action to be spontaneous and unself-conscious and so on. But he's sufficiently trained in Christianity that he rather likes and respects inner strife and inward wrestling. So I think you end up with a picture with a bit of both, which is kind of normal for Nietzsche.